Hello everyone, welcome to Love and a Little Magic, podcast about life magically. I'm Fairly Theta. I wanted to talk today about something that is definitely happening in my life and has shown up in just about every client consultation I've had recently: depletion. So, first of all, depletion is totally normal, especially this time of year. It's gross, it's gray, there's nothing on the trees. We're probably not getting outside because it's terribly windy and sometimes it's even snowing or raining. That's only part of the picture. It doesn't mean that you are deficient or insufficient or even disordered. It's normal. So, first of all, please internalize that. Just because you're feeling run down, just because you're feeling like you don't have it in you right now, doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. We actually live in a society that thrives on our depletion. If we are not at our top, first of all, it's easier for other people to get ahead. And it's also easier to sell you things to potentially make you feel better, right? Not to get conspiratorial here, there's actually nothing conspiratorial about what I'm saying. It is the way that it is. But it's still normal to feel depleted. And sometimes we do need extra to nourish us through these points. It doesn't mean go faster. It doesn't mean you've done something wrong and now you're being punished for it. There's this sense that if you aren't ahead, that first of all, it's your fault for not being there. And second of all, that you don't have the right to slow down yet. And all that does is contribute to burnout and emptiness. We like to think that we can run away from depletion, and that's just not the case. If you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling like you don't have enough energy to get through the day, I hate to tell you, but signing up for a gym and forcing yourself there on your lunch break probably isn't going to fix your problems. It's only going to give you another thing to add to your checklist, to add to your to-do list, to feel depleted over. Similarly, if you are feeling depleted because you're working a 60-hour job and getting absolutely nowhere in it, starting that side hustle sounds like a really good idea, and absolutely, doing something for yourself is a phenomenal way to channel your energy into something more meaningful. But if you don't have that energy to begin with, where is it going to come from in order to be funneled into something else, right? You need to first restore the energy that you have. You can't run away from depletion, or you're going to be forced to slow down. This is something that I have battled constantly in my own life. It took me a very long time to realize that every time I had a big deadline, a big project, a big life thing, literally the day after I'd hit submit, I'd turn that paper in, I would do the thing, I would end up walloped by bronchitis, pneumonia, some sort of respiratory ridiculousness. And I really never once connected. It was probably due to the fact that I was going through these really gigantic projects and telling myself, I'll slow down when I get there, I'll slow down when I get there, I'll slow down when I get there. And then being so overtaxed that I just didn't have it in me to even be able to relax at the end of it. I was just staving off total overwhelm in the meantime. I was in college And I was working on a really gigantic thesis project. And I was gearing up for this like international research trip that I was going to be taking to contribute to this. And literally every waking second of my life was devoted to this project. And about 2 days before this international research trip, I broke my foot. It was also like Memorial Day weekend, so finding a doctor that was even open to like get x-rays and stuff like that was impossible. So guess who went on an international trip with a broken foot, not casted, and then walked all over England with a broken foot? And that's me. So, you know, I went on this trip. I spent 2 weeks literally walking everywhere in every city that I visited and keeping appointments and doing interviews and all of this stuff, and got back to New York and thought I was going to live my life, walk up my 3-flight, walk up and just be. And at that point, my doctor was like, "You're insane. We're going to cast your foot and you can't walk on it until it's fixed." So I ended up spending my entire summer staring at my parents' ceiling. There's more to the story though. To really understand why this was so depleting, you also have to understand that this project was largely due in part to the fact that I was trying to impress my then boyfriend. And that's not to say I wasn't interested in the material. I was very interested in the material, but if we're being real, it was never going to contribute to my long-term career, which is really what a thesis project should do. You should be setting yourself up for long-term success. But I didn't, and I was kind of trying to make somebody love me by being really interesting and really involved in the things that they were interested in. So not only did I break my foot and then have to spend the rest of my summer doing absolutely nothing in my parents' upstairs, I also got broken up with once I was no longer interesting and fun. So all of this is to say that if you don't choose to slow down, there will be something that forces you to slow down or removes those obstacles to slowing down that you've created for yourself from your life. I hear it often from clients, from friends that have poured all of their time and attention into something that is not fulfilling to them ultimately. You might think something's really fulfilling in a moment and then later find out that it actually did nothing to nourish you. And you pour your time into a dead-end job, you pour your energy into trying to get someone to love you, a project that's not actually going to go anywhere, and then that thing is taken away. The job is removed. The love is never granted and in fact removed. The project comes to a crashing halt. I broke my foot. I shouldn't have gone on that trip. I also shouldn't have done that project to get somebody to love me. Just being, kind of brutally real with myself here too. But yeah, we're gonna find ways to sabotage ourselves, and sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that sabotage actually sets us up for greater success in something else, because now we have the opportunity to examine, to nourish, to rest. So this all comes back to this idea of the root cause, treating ourselves as systems. We're very used to, I think, treating ourselves as isolated systems. Certainly, if you are talking about health, for example, you're likely to talk about the circulatory system or the respiratory system or the skeletal system, whatever it is. You're talking about an isolated system that has one job and does one thing and has a certain number of organs that also have one job and do one thing. And it's rare that we actually talk about it in terms of the whole. Once you get into spirituality, you're likely to become familiar with the concept of macrocosm and microcosm. The as above, so below model, so to speak, of life. So from this standpoint, nothing is really isolated. Everything has echoes within everything else. So we might be talking about an issue at work, but if that's actually impacting our resources, what other resources are affected by this? Where do these issues come from? More likely than not, it doesn't start with that singular issue. When I think about this idea of the root cause, it's funny because it actually kind of inverts the model a bit. So the visual model I think of a lot is like the stem of a plant. And if you're imagining a plant, you're probably imagining the stem and then all these little kind of tendrils that branch off and, create these systems from thicker to thinner until you have just a bunch of wispy little tangle, bodies spread throughout the soil. And it's actually kind of the opposite of that. So when you're talking about depletion, and you're saying, you know what, I think I'm feeling overwhelmed because I'm putting in so much time at work, or I think I'm feeling overwhelmed because my relationship isn't nourishing me anymore. That's probably just one of these wispy little tendrils buried under the soil. And if we follow that up, if we follow that back, it's likely that we're going to find that this originates in a larger thematic issue. So again, issues with pouring all of your time and attention into a job or a project that you think is going to get you somewhere, but isn't really going anywhere, and you're just like, I need to get ahead, I need to get ahead, I need to get ahead. That's probably a resource issue, a fear of scarcity, and it probably relates back to some sort of trauma that you've experienced around the idea of resource. It's also worth considering that resource is synonymous with a lot of things. You might think it's about money, but it actually might be about your body or your health. Just like, love and relationships often tie into other kinds of relationships or attitudes that we have about ourselves in those relationships that actually need examination and repair. So from here, once we've found the root, we need to treat the system as a whole. We can't just isolate the issue. Well, I'm feeling depleted, so I'm going to take a week off of work. I mean, if you can, great. That's power to you. But it's also probably not going to fix anything unless you're using that week to really engage in some nourishing practices that rewrite some of the beliefs that you've found, that you've felt around these scarcities, these resource issues, whatever it is that's compelling you to have to get ahead. We don't usually do that. This kind of thinking is actually usually quite foreign until you've lived in this way long enough to be able to recognize it. And that doesn't even make it easier to fix, That doesn't mean that just because you recognize the issue, it's all good, which is something that I'm dealing with very much right now. I can recognize my scarcity issues, my fear of not, being enough, but that doesn't mean that I can snap my fingers and that it goes away. This is something that only comes through really deep reflection. I am not the best meditator by any stretch of the imagination, but I can tell you that there are signs that seep through. for example, one of my go-to telltale signs of depletion is that I stop sleeping. Which sounds so counterintuitive, right? Like, how could I be more tired and then just not sleep? But laying awake at night, if I can quiet my brain down and not think about all of the things I need to do the next day, how terrible I'm feeling, how much something hurts, whatever it is, there are things that sink through. There are revelations that occur. There are memories that come up that actually explain a lot. And if I wasn't slowing down, if I wasn't honoring what was coming up for me in these times of depletion, I wouldn't be able to hear those answers. Dreams are also a big thing for me when it comes to kind of fixing the source. But also thinking of related issues. For example, I mentioned that when I would have a big project, when I would have a big life event, and I would then get walloped with bronchitis or something, I should have maybe thought to myself that I wasn't giving myself space to breathe, that I was creating a suffocating environment for myself. This might sound a little reductive, but honestly, it has helped me a lot when it comes to choosing herbal allies to work with, choosing, minerals to supplement and things like that to really embrace, finding symbolic ties to the things that are presenting themselves in order to kind of energetically feed the issue at hand. So, for example, bronchitis as a symptom of suffocation, taking time to work with aromatics, adding a lot more heat and spices to my food that actually encouraged me to be more present in that moment. Working with plants like lavender and basil and, things that really encouraged me to be presence goes a long way. The same way that you are a complete system and a microcosm of so many other universal systems, these symptoms are as well, and so too are some of the remedies. Finding the symbolism isn't necessarily totally this crazy woo out there way of handling this, I promise. But that's a whole other, probably much more in-depth examination than we can go into here. So I strongly encourage everybody to write things down. But if you're not really a journaler, I personally just find that jotting things down, making lists, even like a bullet journal style thing, helps you keep track of some of the patterns that you're seeing, some of the issues that might be presenting themselves, these symptoms that come up. So you're going to want to keep track of these things. And I know that sounds like just another thing to do when you're feeling depleted, but I promise it actually does contribute to a remedy. But if all you can do right now is curl up and take a nap and take a deep breath, that's okay too. Depletion is normal. We are still in deep winter. And to say that you should be feeling the best ever and just as mobile and productive as you are in the height of spring or summer is kind of ridiculous. So cut yourself some slack. Take it easy. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to do, but hopefully, if you do nothing else today, you can take a deep breath right now, and we'll get through it. Thank you so much for listening or watching if you're watching on YouTube. I absolutely deeply appreciate each and every single one of you who subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform, subscribe on YouTube, however it is that you tune in. I appreciate it. If you would like a little more personal information, feel free to reach out. I'm on Instagram at fairlytheta, or you can actually book a service with me on my website, thatastrologer.com, and read a lot more about my own experiences if you find any value in that. I enjoy sharing because I know I'm not the only one going through it, so you can read more at lifemagically.com, and I will see you next week. Bye!